I want to take a quick moment to share an update on something we've been working on behind the scenes. As many of you know, we've partnered with Project Ultralente to design backcountry adventures specifically for adults living with type 1 diabetes. This August 18th through the 22nd, we are heading to the Tetons in Wyoming for a multi-day backcountry camping and hiking trip. The goal is simple: to bring together a group of T1Ds to navigate the challenges of wilderness exploration, glucose management, and gear in a fully supportive environment. The application window for this trip is closing very soon. If you've wanted to push your limits in the backcountry but felt held back by your diabetes, this is your invitation. To apply, head over to projectinsolnation.com. I've also put the application link, along with our social handles, directly in the show notes of this episode for easy access. Hopefully, I'll see some of you in the Tetons. Now, let's get to the episode.
Oh my God, you did an Ironman. I can never do that. Okay, that's true. And if you think about the whole thing, it's really intimidating. But, it's make that first step. I knew I had a 112-mile bike ride and a marathon if I got through the swim, but I had to get through the swim. Let's get through the swim. See where it goes. Okay, we got through the swim. All right, let's get on the bike. Okay, got a 112-mile bike ride. Let's get to special needs. Okay, got there. And you can break it down into more manageable chunks. Enjoy the day you're having. Because it's probably not going to be the day that you hoped for or dreamed of. One of the things I'm personally working on is happiness in whatever situation I find myself in. It's a double-edged sword, of course. You don't want to be complacent. And that's not to say you don't recognize where there's room for improvement. Gratitude, I think, is helpful. And one of the things I'm currently working on.
Welcome to the T1 Determined podcast, where we bridge the conversation of type 1 diabetes and endurance. I'm Joseph Anthony Marcello, an endurance athlete and a mountaineer. As someone living with T1D, I'm on a mission to uncover and share science-backed information that drives optimal performance and longevity. And as a storyteller, I'm here to explore and share incredible feats in T1D sports physiology. Let's tackle this together. Today, Chris Rome and I speak with T1D triathlete John Murray. Diagnosed in 1992 during a high school soccer physical, John spent decades navigating a shifting diabetes landscape, from a single-day shot of Ultralente to tackling ultra-endurance events. We dive into John's journey from his first local sprint triathlon to signing up for the Ironman Jacksonville, proving that with structured execution, no distance is out of reach. As we build this podcast from the ground up, your support is crucial for our continued growth. Wherever you're listening, please share this episode and others with anyone you think might benefit. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, and on Facebook and YouTube at T1 Determined, and visit our website, T1Determined.net. Please also like and subscribe, and you can leave up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Before we dive in, the topics discussed and the recommendations shared by myself and our guests are personal experiences and not medical prescriptions. Always consult your healthcare team and medical professionals before making any changes to your daily routines, management, or therapies. And now, our conversation with T1D triathlete John Murray. John, thank you very much for joining us today on the T1 Determined podcast. As our listeners who aren't watching may notice, Chris is here with me today. As part of the Project Ultralente T1 Determined collaboration, we are starting to do this as a team. And we're grateful that you are the first person, John, for Chris and I as a team to kind of co-host together. I think we'll get into the whole weeds, but as we were just talking a little bit, your story is very important for others to hear, especially for how long you've been living with type 1 over the years, and then what you've kind of entered into with the Ironman. So I think we should start there at the very beginning. Why don't you kind of explain your diagnosis story back in the 90s and how a world of a difference that was than possibly getting diagnosed today in 2026.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been an adventure. It always is with type 1. I was diagnosed in 92, the day before my junior year of high school. I wanted to get a physical so I could play high school soccer. And turns out I was diabetic, and I didn't know, obviously, I didn't know diddly squat. All I had, um any my family's exposure was my uncle who was type 1, and they called him the Moose because when he had lows, they had a wrestling match with him until he came out of it. And then my cousin on my mom's side, I think, eventually was diagnosed probably in about the same time frame. Um, and, I didn't get to do the whole DKA thing that a lot of people get to do. My endo at the time said, probably if they didn't catch it in August, I probably would have gotten to do the DKA thing around Christmas time. Um, it was probably honeymooning, especially looking back on what they had me do. I started on just 1 shot of Ultralente a day, and, I was on that for quite a while. It was finger sticks, there was no CGMs at the time, and, I used my feel of my lows as a tool in my blood sugar regimen way too much. I was fortunate that I can feel my lows, some people cannot, and, just kinda did the best I could. I got to college, I had a college roommate my freshman year who was also a type 1. I sent him to the hospital 3 times with, low blood sugars that I couldn't pull him out of.
Mm.
Um,
It's funny because, like, the thing that's going viral right now is called Blood Sugar Ninja, where in a world with CGMs, you actually try to guess what your blood sugar is without looking at your CGM, and then you prick manually, and it's interesting to think that that was just the way of life, like, you didn't have the concept of what a trend was, and so it seems to me that it was just more common to have these accidental lows that were more severe than it is today.
yeah, and he would he'd go and play basketball at the gym in the evenings
Mhm.
for hours at a time, and, I think he was on NPH and regular insulin. And, a couple times he legitimately like, came back and ate cookies and drank juice and legitimately tried to not have lows. And I remember one specific evening he did that, and then 2 in the morning he's having a seizure.
Yeah.
Um, he didn't I'm not sure what happened to him. I lost touch with him, but he lived through the year, and, it's just the nature of the beast. And at some point, my uncle passed away, and I got to watch him spend the last year and a half of his life in the hospital due to complications from type 1, and, he was diagnosed in probably the 50s or 60s. I think he always did the best he could, but, obviously he struggled. And I don't wish that on anybody, but it's very impactful. I'm not interested in going out like that. And he had a sore on his ankle from shoveling snow, and it never healed, and, you know, eventually they took the lower leg, and then eventually died of heart failure, basically. Um
Now, kinda growing up and seeing that side of type 1,
mm,
and then you're saying you're playing a soccer game, like, during your time of diagnosis. Were you ever At what point did you think about continuing your athleticism with type 1, and did that ever, like, scare you going in? Because I mean, did you think that, like, being an athletic person and playing sports with type 1 could better your type 1, or were you going into the sport just thinking, "I wanna play the sport," but also at the same time witnessing what you were witnessing with other type 1s? How did that
yeah,
all kinda
so
conjoin?
I started playing soccer when I was, like, 5, and
Yeah.
so I was always playing soccer, and my endo at the time said probably, uh, playing soccer helps, hide some of the symptoms, and then thinking back on that summer, I had a lot of the symptoms, leading to into that. I didn't see my uncle, with his problems until I was in college,
Yeah.
um, and I think that was halfway through my college career. Um But it never really occurred to me that I would stop playing soccer. Now I ended up, uh, making a club team. I wasn't ever really any good at soccer, but I loved it. I ended up making a club team, and then I think at the end of my junior year, the team kinda folded, and I lost track of what was going on with that, and then I got a job and, what have you, but I've always tried to stay active because it helps.
Mm.
Um, I didn't do a ton of organized sports in college. I played a little bit of amateur soccer after graduating, and then I came across a martial art called Aikido and did that for about 10 years. When those fancy black belts are all the rage. Um, and then that got kind of silly political, and which didn't bother me until it affected the training. My wife and I were like, "Okay, we're done." And so I'm like, "Okay, what am I gonna do now?" I started running just for the increased insulin sensitivity, and
Mhm.
my wife's not a runner, so we have road bikes, and then I started looking into it, and I'm like, maybe I could do a triathlon." And, found a local sprint and went and did it, and I was like, "Huh, this is neat." And, the thing about triathlon is there's a wide variety of people who you wouldn't expect to see doing triathlons, and it's a very welcoming community. Everybody's very encouraging, you know?
Mhm.
We're all suffering, we're all struggling with our own struggles, and we're really basing ourselves and doing things for various reasons. Um, and there's always something to work on. I'm a pretty terrible swimmer. I'm comfortable in the water, but I'm not good. Um, and then at some point I came across there's a platform called Zwift, which is a virtual cycling and running environment. And I came across a Type 1 group, Zwift Team Type 1. Um, and I got a smart trainer and started, and that's why I have any kind of fitness at all, especially when my son was younger.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd ride when he was napping. Um,
So at what point did you discover this group? And then so, like, were you still managing it how you were there CGMs? Were you still on the pump? So, like, at what point in your
so
diabetes management did you start to discover this?
somewhere around the same time frame as when I started running, I heard about Night Scout,
Yeah.
which is a really cool thing. If you all don't know that story, go look up the Night Scout story. It's amazing. And then I heard of, came across a Dexcom CGM. I'm like, whoa, this is cool. And so I went to my endo and got a script, and it was so it's probably been close to 10 years, 9 years now
Okay. Yeah.
that I've been on a CGM. And I had to force myself to stop looking at my phone, watching the CGM graph. It's amazing. First time you put that thing on, you're like,
It's
whoa.
addictive.
And so I had to force myself to go to sleep.
It's definitely easy to get caught in the data with all the stuff available now. Now, when you were talking about going through the athletics and I guess through high school and into college, it brought back for me, like I was diagnosed very young, so sports were a big part of my type 1 management. But I sit back now and I realize, like, I didn't even manage my type 1 when I was playing sports. There was a good section where I could say in probably close to 8 to 10 years, I could probably count the number of finger sticks I did on 2 hands. Like, I went off of feel, which is not good, but luckily, like you had mentioned, luckily I was able to feel lows and highs. So I always wonder in the back of my head, like, was there any damage done at that time? But at the same
But
point,
so,
like,
like, on the contrary, Chris, is like, I was diagnosed with the technology already there. So I was diagnosed 7 years ago. So the Dexcom G6 was out, and that's just as accurate as the G7 is now. Hopefully the G8's more accurate, but it's just like I learned type 1 on the technology. So to both John and you, Chris, is like, I don't know. It's like I feel low and then I'm not low. And it's just like, I don't have the ability, as some people do, to really guess the blood sugar as well or really feel it, just because I'm so used to just checking the graph and seeing where I'm at.
Well, and
yeah,
it's a bit of a trap because it's most of the time it's accurate,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's not.
yeah,
And the problem with the sensation or the feeling of what you're low is your body will sort of recalibrate to wherever you're running it. And so like you may feel low and you're not, and maybe it's because you've been running higher or what have you, and or or vice versa. And so it's not the most effective tool, and there's caveats. Uh,
mhm.
but I wouldn't, Chris, I wouldn't worry too much about whatever damage is done. It's past and it's done for one. You can't
yeah,
really
and that's what
undo it.
I always say. I give myself grace because I was a teenager and a young adult. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna sit here and have a 5.8 A1C as a 19-year-old kid in college. Like, it's
Yeah.
just
And you're
Shocking.
also going through something where you're probably damaging your body in other ways
Yeah, yeah,
that
exactly,
on top of it.
exactly, and it was more just like I just wanted to highlight, like, the relatability to John
Mhm,
talking about it because I came up MDI before insulin pumps, before CGMs,
mhm,
and, like, it was a very different world than it is now. Like, granted, I was still young, but once the pump was introduced and then later down the road when the CGMs came out, it was like night and day with diabetes management because it made it so much less of a hassle. And I know it's like a terrible word to use, but, like, when you're 21, 23, 28 years old, like, having to prick your finger 8, 10, 14 times a day and then do all the calculations, like, you don't wanna do it. Like,
yeah,
you fight doing it a lot, but when it became all automated with the closed loop technology and the CGMs, yeah, all the data is available, but it takes a lot of the decision fatigue away, and it made it much more reasonable, I guess is the best word, to really tighten up control, for me at least.
mhm,
They, I was anti-pump for a long time because when I went and looked at it, the pumps gave you better control allegedly. But if you looked at all the studies had all their participants checking their blood sugars 4 to 6 times a day anyway. If you're taking your sugars that often anyway, you're gonna have better control. So I wasn't ever, for a long time I wasn't sold on the pump, but the ability of the closed loop systems to modulate your insulin overnight especially has been a huge game changer. I like to say that CGM was a game changer. It was life-changing technology after CGM. And then closed loop insulin delivery is another order of magnitude. And all those systems kind of have their nuances, the pluses and minuses. Before signing up for the Ironman, I've been using the T-Slim, and that works pretty well. I like that system because it's got a lot of opportunities to modulate the insulin delivery and tell the algorithm that your insulin needs to change. I had 5 or 6 profiles when I was using T-Slim, and then you have regular mode, exercise mode, and sleep mode. And most people that are athletic end up using sleep mode because the activity mode has the auto boluses are usually too much. Uh, and I was able to make that work well. With the shorter slim, I would just disconnect and leave it in transition or hand it to somebody.
I was about to ask
I was in the water.
if you stayed on the pump for the triathlons. I know a lotta athletes come off of the pump and go MDI on their event days because of, A, tighter control and just the logistics of going back and forth with the pump profiles.
It's the like everything, there's pluses and minuses. And the biggest benefit for me for the pumps is the low prevention, which
yeah,
is sort of a double-edged sword when you're doing endurance meets, because if you're below target, it's gonna cut your insulin back. And you could end up in euglycemic DKA. And also, if you have a pump site failure, it's a much quicker trip to DKA. In fact, I did my first triathlon in, let's see, May 2017. I was a sprint, and then next year I got around to doing a half Ironman, and did my first half Ironman in Gulf Coast in Panama City Beach in May 2018. Yeah, and my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time, and that was an adventure. Uh, I got off the bike. The bike computer said it was 90 degrees to start the run walk, and at the time I think I was using a 670G Medtronic Pilot. um, and I was able to make that system work. I swam with that pump because I believed it was water resistant, and it is, but I killed about a pump a year on that system. And I didn't fully appreciate how screwed I would be if that pump failed in the middle of a race. So I continued to do triathlons. I did another half Ironman the next year, Florida 70.3 over in Haines City because I could drive to it. That all went well. The other thing I didn't realize was by wearing the pump, I'm slowing myself down by like 20 seconds to 30 seconds per 100 yards on my pace. Um, got fed up with the Medtronic and went to the T-Slim. And then my first half Ironman that I tried to do with the T-Slim, I disconnected, left the pump site, left the pump at the med cable, and then 800 yards into the swim, my pump site came loose. This is a problem. So I've been doing triathlons about 5 years, but at that point, and I never
Yep.
had a problem with the pump site or CGM.
It's kinda like you don't know until you come across the I mean, we experience this all the time as type 1 diabetics. You don't know something's gonna go wrong until it does go wrong, and
Mm.
then you have to kinda figure it out in the moment because 'cause you're halfway through this thing.
So I said, you know what, I'm done. Pulled the plug and drove home, and I was starting to get nauseous on the way home. My blood sugar hit 300 and something because I didn't have any insulin.
Mm,
Anyway, to get insulin in me, which is a terrible idea, especially for a half Ironman, even an Olympic distance. You know, Olympic distance, I can do those in about 3 hours. And so, um, but it's I'm trying not to be. So a lot of people that do triathlons are very type A, um, and I'm trying not to be because I could be, but I'm trying not to abandon my family and go all in on training, which is a possibility.
yeah.
Um, a lot of things in my life I've kind of backed into, and triathlon's no different. I kind of I kind of backed into Aikido because one of the guys that I worked with had a tracing of a samurai sword, and then I started looking into it, and he talked about this Iaido thing. And found a local dojo that was doing Iaido, and then they also do Aikido, and started reading about Aikido, and he was like, "Oh, this is cool." Um, Similarly, I was a mechanical engineer for a long time, and uh, because I was good at physics in high school. My senior year of high school, I did physics problems for 3 classes a day, and mechanical engineering seemed like a good fit, and it was, and I had a good 16-year career for that with that. Um, and then got fed up with it, and when
I think that's a very realistic approach because I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there who wanna do stuff like an Ironman or even run a marathon or a half marathon, and they just stop because they think of all the training that goes into it, until you realize that if you wanna you can put all that training aside if that's what you wanna do. I'm somebody who does want to do that, and I set a lot of time away, from stuff I probably should be doing for training, but at the same time, I do think, like, if you're worried about that time for training, it shouldn't stop you from still doing it because you can try to fit life into
for things that we really want to do, we're gonna find a way to make that happen,
exactly, yep.
Yep.
more or less. There's a quote that's been going around. I don't remember who it's attributed to, but it's whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Often true. I talk to so many people that are like, "Oh my god, you do triathlons?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just kind of decided to do it one day, and I'm not super fast." And
Yeah.
it's and the one thing I love about endurance sport is your results are directly correlated to what you put into it, really.
Mhm,
And it's there's not you can't really take it. And so I always thought I could do it for an Ironman. Um, for me, the biggest challenge was more logistics and family compatible logistics.
yeah,
Um, and I didn't want to fly with my bike. I'm not comfortable doing that, and I didn't want to fly my family to a vacation race. They weren't really interested in doing that. Um, the closest local one is Ironman Florida, and that's in November. And weather's always suspect, and middle of the school year, and it just wasn't really a good fit. And then Ironman announced that they were doing Jacksonville this year, in their first year, and my wife and I talked about it. She didn't say no, so I said, "Oh, that must mean she doesn't love it."
That's
And
exactly what that means.
then, I told her I signed up for the race, and she was not exactly enthused, but, um, it's the way it's my the way I look at it, though, why I'm doing the training kind of anyway.
Mhm,
Maybe not enough to do an Ironman, but, I think we all understand the value of moving every day or every other day or every couple of days, and the
mhm,
effect that has on your insulin sensitivity. It's tougher to manage while you're doing it, of course, um, but the after effects are you just can't really get from anything else. And
Mhm.
so that's a big part of my why. And also, at some point we all recognize we're getting older. It's not going to get easier, so I'm trying to keep up with my son. And Chris, you have your backpacking trips, your epic backpacking trips that you're trying to do, and there's amazing places to see on this planet that a lot of people can't get to,
Yeah.
and you know, maintaining our mobility and our fitness helps us get there, right? So
Yep. Yep.
that's a big part of my why. Um,
It's amazing, and I think that's enough to get you training and enough to the start line. Before we go into, because I really want to dive into the weeds of what this Ironman was for you. Let's define, because I only knew this what so I knew what a triathlon was, but I didn't know what a full Ironman was until like maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So for the listeners, let's define it. Of an Ironman is a triathlon of massive standards. I believe, and correct me here because I might not get the numbers exactly correct, but the swimming is 2.4 miles, and then the bike ride is 120 miles, and
uh,
then
112 miles.
112 miles. Okay, 112 miles, and then the running is a marathon, 26.2 miles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a marathon level swimming bike warm up. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, basically
That's
triathlon is
the line
something.
of the podcast right there.
Yeah.
And there's different distances. Sprint distances around here are usually a 400-yard, 440-yard swim. You might be in the water 12 minutes if you're slow. And then a 10 to 12-mile bike, and then a 5K run. And then the next distance, uh, usually every jump doubles the distances. So an Olympic distance, there's a big one around here. It's St. Anthony's, which I try to do every year. And pros come and get paid, and it's amazing. 2,500 people, 3,000 people sign up for the weekend. That's a 1,500-meter swim. It's like zero point 0.9 miles, a 25-mile bike, and then a 10K run. And then you have a half Ironman, which is a total distance of 70.3 miles. It's a 1.2-mile swim, 56-mile bike, and then a half marathon after you're done just rounds with all that. You get to run in the afternoon. It's awesome. And then the full distance Ironman is, like you said, it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then 26.2-mile run walk.
In Florida, and then
Well,
with
yeah,
the
this is
humidity and the heat.
was a little toast. I think my bike computer said the average was 90F on the bike,
Yeah.
and it was hot. But personally, I'd rather be hot than warm. I grew up in Florida. Um, yeah, I the swims, some of the swims, some of the Ironman swims are cold, like 60F water, and you get out of the water and you gotta get on the bike, and depending on where you are, it may be warm or maybe cold.
I've heard that's the hardest part of the Ironman is the transition from the swim to the bike.
I think that kind of depends. In Jacksonville, we got to run 0.28 miles from the swim exit to transition. So instead of it being 140.6 miles, it's really 140.9. But I think in Kona, they run like a mile around the transition after they get out of the water. So, I mean, if you've got the endurance, it's not like it's a huge act.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like Chattanooga used to be like a 116-mile bike ride, but the and some of those different courses out there are different nuances, and at the end of the day, they're all fun.
Whatever level you're at, it's gonna be hard for you because you're
Well,
at that level.
that's the other beautiful thing about endurance sports. You can make it as hard as you want.
Yeah.
It's all up to you. And most of us want to go faster, so we want to push ourselves a little bit. But at the end of the day, you can't sprint a marathon.
Nope.
Like,
Unfortunately, I learned that the hard way, but
so, um, but there's a lot of chatter on social levels about appropriate training levels and what have you. And most of my triathlon journey has really been just trying to make sure I could do the distances.
Mhm.
Um, I had never done a running race before, so before my first half Ironman, I went and signed up for a half marathon. And I was pretty confident I could do the run, but I'd never been to a running race before. I didn't know anything about like seating, pens, and all that. It was a small local race, but I'm standing in the back, and I'm like, oh. So I kind of started in the back, and I had to run through the crowd because, the balloon ladies were back there. But if you're familiar with that, the Run Disney folks are fanatical, but that's another story. Um, but that worked out all right. But yeah, it's you just gotta figure out what pace you can do, and
Mhm.
then just keep working on it. I think the one thing that a lot of type ones fail at miserably is fueling their activities, and a lot of people get away with like disconnecting from their pump for an hour, and that works for an hour because you're riding the wave of the insulin peaks 1 to 2 hours if after it goes into your system. But the longer you go, that starts to fall apart
Mhm.
Yeah,
kind of
that
quickly.
that falls apart, and insulin is what carries the fuel to the muscles too, so if you don't have
Yeah.
insulin on board, you're playing with fire.
Yeah,
And
and I guess
eventually,
there's the 2 balances of, do you put insulin on board? Because also insulin becomes more sensitive, so it would have to be less
yeah.
insulin when you're doing an activity, or do you give a basal dose so you constantly have insulin, in theory, on board, but it also depends for how long the event is. So what was your game plan going into this Ironman in Jacksonville? Just
So
with not letting that insulin run out?
so the for a long time I was using a 50% basal profile. And I figured out that I was underfueling my efforts. And so at some point I switched to a 75% basal profile, so that I was on a T-slim. And then correction factor that was similarly adjusted to adjust the aggressiveness of the algorithm. And usually try to start that, if ideally just try and start that an hour before I start working out. And for a long time I was just running the 75% profile pretty much all the time anyway. Um, Usually I'll eat like a cookie before I start my workouts, whatever I'm doing, if it's like an hour and or an hour or 2, and a mix of carbs and fats kinda helps me get into the workout, and then usually I'll bump things along with the gel. Um, as I started paying a little more attention, started tweaking things a little bit, um, but generally for longer efforts, like 2.5 to 3 hours plus, I would usually eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at the start and bolus about a third to a quarter, depending on how much insulin I had and
Mhm.
where my blood sugars were at. Because the thing about the closed loop systems is you're running higher going into an activity. They've been giving you extra insulin to knock you down. And then you start doing your activity and and that'll supercharge. Sometimes that'll supercharge the insulin the extra insulin you can get.
Yeah,
Um,
and lower
so
it on its own, so, like, the cardio
yeah,
will lower your blood sugar
yeah.
as well, so that's kinda like a double double whammy.
Yeah, and, it's the biggest thing that I that I don't think it's talked about a lot of initially is the timing. It's the importance of timing of all of these things, and insulin, food, and exercise, talk about carb ratios and insulin sensitivity factors and basal rates and all this stuff, and that's all important, don't get me wrong, but it's not like carb ratio is a fixed value. It's not like we live in a digital world. Our bodies are not digital, we're analog beings, and
Mhm.
it's the timing affects where and all that things land. So, um, that's I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is figuring out timing and figuring out how to get enough insulin in your body to properly fuel your efforts and your recovery. When I was doing the 50% profile, I'd almost always have to give myself a bolus at the end because of the post-shift spike, which is pretty common. And, I don't have to do that quite as much if I got more insulin in me during the activity and fuel properly, and then the other key for me is doing a DC cool down.
Yeah.
I guess one of the questions that I have, that since we're on insulin and different profiles and all that, so like I don't do triathlons, but I'm an endurance runner. So I've been able to really sit on one profile and just time my fueling and how much I take. around the profile. But when you're swimming, biking, and running, does each activity, do you kind of respond differently and have different requirements for each activity?
So I don't have my swimming dialed in very well, honestly. I didn't do enough training, honestly. But,
That's okay. It's the
um,
warm up for the rest, though.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, but that was a big part of that, and we'll get into that when we talk a little bit more about the race. The challenge, of course, is you're flying blind when you swim, and the other part of swimming, especially in triathlons, is most of the swims are until you get to the Ironman distance are an hour or less. Like how to cut off half Ironman is usually an hour and 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, and so you can sort of kind of fake your way through that and then get out onto the course with the rest of it. Um, I don't have a significant difference in what I do from swimming to bike or from biking to running. They're pretty close uh, in terms of what I do to manage that sort of thing. The biggest challenge I find is trying to keep after my fluids, and that's why I separate my fluids and my fuel, so I can still take hydration in even if my blood sugars are elevated.
Mhm.
Um, I'm usually using like G0, Powerade Zero, something of that nature. A couple years ago, I was running, and I lived in a slightly in Florida, and I'd come back from my runs and sit down on a cold towel and get up, and I was a little lightheaded. I'm like, this happened a couple of times. That's weird. So I checked my blood sugar after one, or blood pressure after one of these incidences, and my blood pressure was like 15 points lower than my normal. Hmm, that's kind of a problem. So I went and did a fluid loss check, and I think I calculated I lost like 1.9 liters of fluid in like an hour of running. And it was mid-May, 10 o'clock a.m. in Florida. Uh, but that was a little eye-opening, and so between that and the fact that trying to keep sensors functioning, I tend to try and overhydrate. Um,
I think it's really important because I also think it's not talked about enough of because when we're doing these kind of endurance events, we're not having perfect blood sugars during the endurance events, and elevated blood sugar, even if just slightly, directly impacts your hydration. It can dehydrate
yeah,
you.
yeah. Your body is trying to get rid of the excess sugar. It's gonna
Mhm.
purge that through the kidneys typically, and that's gonna contribute to dehydration. I don't so because of my focus on trying to make sure I overhydrate, I don't tend to cramp. I did. We'll get into that. I don't usually have a problem with cramps, and I think it's because of trying to make sure I take in enough fluids and electrolytes when I'm doing my workouts and stuff. Um, so that's kind of my current approach to things. And the one thing I didn't really talk about was I've been using since I started on the G5. I've been using Night Scout developed community developed tools to display my blood sugars on my Garmin devices. And I can do that without the need for an internet connection because I use a tool called Extra Plus, which is an Android only app instead of the Dexcom app. And so I don't have to authenticate to Dexcom servers. It just
Mhm.
broadcasts that stuff locally on the phone to Garmin's app. And then I have special data fields in my Garmin devices that display my CGM. And I can do that off grid, which is super helpful.
So the start line of the Ironman in Jacksonville, what was I mean, I guess we start where it starts. What was the swim like?
Well, so really should back up because
Yeah,
the
I'm jumping ahead of my no pun intended, jumping ahead of myself
but
into the water.
hike one requires a little forethought,
Mhm.
and like I switched the Omnipod because the swim I was concerned about being disconnected from the swim for that long. I didn't know how long my swim was going to be, and it was current 6 feet. Nobody had done this race before, and I'm a slow swimmer. I was figuring an hour and a half to 2 hours just in the water. Um, that's a long time to not have insulin in your body.
Yeah.
And so the Omnipod is attached to you and can give you insulin while you're in water. So I switched to it. It's not the most aggressive algorithm, and it's one of these systems that wants to learn your needs, which I detest, but I've been able to make it work. So I started using that in November. My my pod was due to expire 2 o'clock on Saturday, the day of the race when I was racing.
Okay.
And there's an 8-hour grace period with the Omnipod.
Mhm.
And I might have been able to make it. And I was like, nah, this isn't worth it. So on Friday, I changed my pod. One of the things I like to do to try and make sure my devices stick is try to put them on 3 layers of skin tack, make sure the skin's clean, 3 layers of skin tack, and then not get it wet or sweat for several hours to let that adhesive bond continue to form. Because most pressure-sensitive adhesives take like 12 to 24 hours to 48 hours to reach full bond strength. Usually, bond strength is about 75% after about 12 hours. Different pressure-sensitive adhesives have a different, aspects to that. So, I was trying to make sure that I wasn't gonna have an issue there. I got a script for, an insulin pen from my endo because if my pump fell off, I wasn't optimistic that I'd be able to reattach it when I'm sweating and soaking wet. And so that was my backup plan in case the pod failed or fell off. Uh, so anyway, and then the logistics of this race were a little bit. I've always been a little weary of point-to-point swims because you have to leave transition,
Mhm.
get on a shuttle bus, go to the swim start, maybe get in water eventually, and then swim back. And so I was away from my phone for about 3 hours. So I was flying blind. I brought 3 gels and a bottle of Gatorade and my glucometer to the swim start. And they have when you check it in an Ironman race, you get 5 bags. Your morning clothes bag, which you take with you to swim start, you drop that off, and they give it back to you at the end. So I took that, and I put my glucometer and my flip flops in there, and then I had my 3 gels. And I checked my blood glucose after I got off the bus. It was at 146. I was like, oh boy. So I took one of the gels. It was a Martin 160. It's a little more than what I was training with, the Martin 100s. Those are the Martin 160s are what they had on course. Uh, uh, so I started training with those. And then I had 2 more gels. My original plan was to have a total of 4 gels with me at swim start. Take one uh, if I needed, and then maybe take one right in the middle, right at the start, and then maybe take one in the middle.
Mhm.
So anyway, I met another Type 1, chatted with her quite a bit. We ended up jumping in together. It was pretty awesome.
Nice.
Just before I jumped in, I took another gel, and then I had my 3rd gel. I usually tuck it in my goggle strap behind my head.
Yeah.
And that usually works well. It's usually what I deal with when I'm swimming in the pool or whatever I'm swimming, just to have it in case I need it. So I jumped in. We were jumping off a dock, feet first, and I reached back to my gels gone. Oh boy. Well, nothing to do but swim now. And so I got through the swim. I tried to hug the buoys and stay towards the middle of the river because
Yeah.
there was a river swim current assisted with the tide. And fluid dynamics are such that the fastest current's going to be in the middle, farthest away from the drag of the bottom of the shoreline. And I was having trouble sliding because of the kayakers and swim support were between me and the buoys. But swim went well, felt good. I thought I glanced at my watch. I thought it said an hour 20. I was like, wow, I'm fast. Got out and started jogging to transition. And I had my insulin pen in my transition bag. I was planning to make a change, full clothing change for
Mhm.
comfort. There's a lot of people that do that, especially if I'm there first. And I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in that bag as well, and some gels and stuff. So I got into the changing tent and took my time trying to make sure I've got everything. Uh, Took my usual 1/3 dose of insulin. I was at 166, doing
I was
pretty
gonna say,
good.
yeah, did you check it before? So you ended the swim around 160. Well, so I guess that you didn't see what happened in between, but in your mind, that's a good spot to end in transition
Well,
phase.
yeah, I mean, I can work with that. I can,
Yeah.
and I was trending down, so I didn't know what my history was in the water until
Mhm.
later when I looked at my graph, which I sent that. Um, And I thought, well, this is pretty good. And because I was worried. A lot of my swims, I was starting to tank after like an hour. Um, so I was really, really pretty worried about the swim. But like I said, after I dropped that gel, what are you gonna do now? You swim
Yeah.
and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so got into transition, grabbed my bag, got into transition, and gave myself the bolus. And then the nice thing about the pod is it talks to the CGM directly. So even if the phone hasn't picked up your CGM data, the pod has. And so I opened my pod app and saw my blood sugar and gave myself the dose. And I'm like, okay, we're good. That's an important side note. You're not allowed to have your phones on, or headphones or anything during triathlon. Um, Most race directors have allowed me to have. I've never had a problem having my phone. I told them it's a medical device. I don't tend to have
Yeah.
it out when I'm racing. They want to focus on racing.
Yeah.
And Ironman recently issued a edict that no video or camera, taking of videos or pictures or videos on course. There have been some really bad behaviors by social media influencers during some races recently, and they don't want any of that on course.
Well, in
So
this
anyway,
case, the phone is the part of the medical device, so
yeah, yeah,
that's
and
fine.
so I talked to Athlete Services when I checked in. I had emailed them previously, and they're like, "No problem, just check in with Athlete Services." They took my number down, and so yeah, I didn't have any issue because it's a DQ. You'll be disqualified.
Yeah.
That's kind of a problem if you put all this work in.
Yeah. And do it. And then
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't want to do that. So anyway, so I grabbed all that stuff, got changed, took my time, tried to drink some more. I'd originally planned to have a bottle of Gatorade in that bag. I think I did. I originally planned to have a bottle of Gatorade or Powerade Zero at each of the quote stopping points, and we'll get into that.
Mhm.
And I kind of failed on that, but that's another story. On course nutrition for Ironman currently is Martin Gels, and they have a contract with Precision Hydration, which is not my most favorite electrolytes. It's fizzy. It's not very. It tastes like Pedialyte. It's not that great. So I had
But it is electrolytes.
probably G0 and Powerade
Okay.
already set up on white.
Yeah.
I think I went to the bathroom after I got out of the changing tent, my potty, and hopped on bike. Um, Bike was hot, and most of the first third was southbound, and we had a headwind. And so it became pretty obvious. I was trying to ride to a heart rate. I was kind of failing at that. I was a little higher than I wanted to be.
Mhm.
But it became apparent that I wasn't probably going to hit the numbers that I'd hoped to hit, which is fine. Um, and had a one situation on the bike where I thought a lady was coming we had a coned off lane for most of the bike course, and she was like making a U-turn, and I was passing somebody and in my lane, and I thought it was like steamed at her and everything was fine. But it's just the toughest thing with triathlon is not over biking, so you can actually run because you still have to do the run. And that's my superpower is over biking so I can crawl on the run. Um, but all that went well. I got to one of the things you get 5 bags of
Yeah.
ammo. One enclosed bag, run bag, bike special needs bag, and run special needs bag. And so I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in each of the bike and run bag special needs bags. So I had 4 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Bike special needs, I stopped, got my bag, took my time, took 20 minutes going around at bike special needs halfway through the bike. I took a dose of insulin that was slightly less than what I had taken at the start of the bike because I knew I still had that insulin on. It probably took a little bit too much, but that's all right. Managed to get the sandwich down. I got my bottles refilled and I dumped some G0 powder into them with the precision hydration to give it a little bit better appetite, a little bit
Yeah.
better taste. And then wandered off on my way on the bike. And finally got a tailwind. So the bike course was you head south for like 20 something, 30 miles. You do a couple of loops down there and then you head north
Yeah.
back to the transition. And finally got a tailwind on the way back. And mile 104, I cramped.
were you still getting at what point did you cramp? Were you thinking to yourself of like, "Hey, I'm almost there, this is getting easier," or did you cramp at a point where it was hard to get to that transition?
Um, well, it's, so I was riding by a kind of feel and heart rate,
Mhm.
and the cramps just kind of just showed up. Um, I was already fairly relaxed at that point because I knew I wasn't going to hit my time goals.
Yeah.
Um, I was hoping, so my hope is that I can do an Ironman someday in under 12 hours. And to do that, if you figure like a 2-hour bike, 6-hour ride, and a 4-hour run with minimal transitions. And a 6-hour bike is slightly less than 19 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But as I was heading south, I wasn't approaching 19 miles an hour. So anyway, but yeah, somewhere along the way, it was after the last aid station on the bike. Every 12 to 20 miles, they had aid stations on the bike. Um, and I was just behind on fluids. And so I think I didn't have a bottle of Gatorade at bike special needs, and I think that would have helped. Um,
Yeah.
it was a hot day, and I sweat a lot. Um, but
And
I
as you
got
were
through it.
saying, through the training, you were try to stay overhydrated, so your body
Yeah.
was used to overhydration, so even it's
Well,
more
I mean,
exaggerated.
you can't in those conditions. You sort of, kind of can't keep up, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, and oh yeah, and then so anyway, I got around the bike course, and there were 11 bridges, which is what passes for hills in Florida. None of them were. I didn't think any of them were too bad. I was able to spin on most of them. My general approach is to try and spin and not hammer the bridges to save my
Mhm.
legs, and to try and manage my heart rate. And then, yeah, so I got through the bike course. The and it was fine. Got to run to the run transition. So hop you hop off the bike, volunteer to catch your bike. You go and grab your run bag. I got my change of clothes and sandwich in there. I take another bolus, this time even less, and I could only get 3/4 of my sandwich down because I was starting to be nauseous. And I drank like 8 some odd 10 cups of water and precision hydration. And then just took it easy. It was 29 minutes in transition too, screwing around. and and got out onto the run course, and I'd always planned to do 9 minutes on, 1 minute off, which is what I'd done for my training in my long runs. And that's something I picked up from Team Oxygen. I picked up some YouTube videos about how to do an Ironman and first timers and tips and all that. And that really is a good way to manage the fatigue and manage your heart rate.
Mm.
Um, and then I walked the aid stations as well.
Did you
Uh,
notice that the running comparatively to the biking and the swimming, and obviously the fatigue factor, that your heart rate was inch like drifting higher when you
yeah.
started running?
Um, Actually, I felt like I did fairly decent on that.
Okay.
The bigger challenge for me was the nausea.
Okay.
Um, I was mildly nauseous. I was able to take some stuff in.
Yeah.
And so every aid station, I try and drink a little bit of fluids, a little bit of, uh, they had Coke, which is a staple at run courses. Usually they flatten it. Some of the aid stations actually cooled it down. And then, dumping ice in my hat. And I had a towel, one of those cooling towels that I wrapped around my neck and dumps that in. Fortunately, the run course had a fair amount of shade, probably 50%, and, it ended up being a little bit overcast as we got later into the afternoon. Um, in hindsight, what I really should have done was just drank water. I was overly concerned about hyponatremia, which it can happen on hot days where people just drink water and don't drink enough,
Mhm.
take enough electrolytes. And I had some salt tabs, that I could chew on. I took one of those, and like I said, I should have just been drinking water instead of trying to force myself to drink the precision hydration.
Mhm.
Um, but I got around okay. I wasn't in danger of missing any of the cutoffs, and met some awesome people along the way. Um, there's a kid that I ended up running with. He was a kid. He's 25. He's going through physician's assistant school, and we had a lovely chat about what I have to deal with, and hopefully gave him some perspective. And
Yeah, from learning probably a little bit about it and having that medical backing.
yeah,
Did you know
and
what were you noticing about your blood sugar trends by the time you got to the run? Especially considering that you were still moving once you're at the run. Was it more of a roller coaster?
it had flattened out by that point. I was
Okay.
kind of overtaken. I'd taken a little too much insulin at spike special needs, so I was
Yeah.
struggling a little bit on the back half of the bike early on, and I slammed a couple of gels, and it seemed to it seemed like it was fine. When I was towards the end of the bike and I was starting to get nauseous, I tried to take another gel and wasn't able to. So I was a little mildly concerned at that point. But one of the things that happens sometimes is you end up triggering a stress response. And I've always been really worried about being nauseous
Mhm.
ever since I've been diabetic. And the times that I've been had that issue, when I've thrown up, my blood sugars have been stable. And I think it's because of that stress response.
Yeah.
Now, granted, when that's happened, I haven't had like 5 or 10 units of, 20 units of insulin in my body. Obviously, you can overcome these effects. But fortunately, I didn't, I try and take like bananas and stuff and sipping on the Coke. And I was certainly keeping an eye on it. Um, but I didn't ever feel like I didn't ever drop out of the bottom on the run.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I hope to finish, like I said, delusions of doing 12 hours, that probably was never going to happen. And, would have been nice to finish in the light, in daylight, but that didn't happen. And, that's fine. I got around the course and
Yeah, you still
got
yeah.
it.
Yeah, 100%. What
um,
was talk to us about that finish, gearing up, like, getting close to the end and then finally seeing the end in the dark, a little bit obviously a little bit about blood sugar, but also just, like, emotionally from that long day, from the training, from everything you've done from the half marathon to that point.
it was amazing. It was,
Mhm.
they've got a first timer's bell on the finishing sheet, and I kinda passed that and ran back and rang that, and then saw my wife and my son, and he gave him hugs and kisses, and then he just, you know, took my time, and yeah, it's just it's hard to describe. It's, you know, everything that went into it, and just crossing that finish line. It's amazing, and, You know, everybody talks about it that's done it. Almost everybody talks about it that's done it, and it's hard to really describe.
It's
The other
way
thing,
more than just a finish, like, there's so much more emotion and sacrifice and everything that's piled in that comes spilling out at the finish line.
Really, it's the
Yeah,
journey.
yeah.
it was, yeah. So it's amazing. Like I said, the Ironman kind of is the Disney of triathlon. They really, uh, uh, in terms of their professionalism and approach to putting the events on,
Yeah.
and they're expensive, but it's kind of hard to do 112-mile bike course and permits and everything. I think they had 400 and something police officers. It was amazing. And my wife was not eager about my endurance activities, but um, she does support me financially, and so I can't complain too loudly. And she took my son and had him entertained all day while I was goofing around on course, going around riding my bike and running and stuff. And then we did a candy factory tour, and there's a cat, a big cat rescue type place they went and did a tour of, and so my son had a really good time, and, yeah, it was an epic weekend.
First
So,
off, congratulations because it's an incredible feat. Second off, congratulations because it's an incredible feat with type 1. And thirdly, I think from you explaining it and talking to you, our conversation, it seems that nothing went wrong, but it seemed like you knew you had the blood sugar management plan going into it, and at least when it comes to type 1 diabetes, maybe it was a little bit different for hydration, it worked. Everything that you planned for worked to I mean, it didn't go perfect, probably didn't go perfect to your standards, but it got you to the finish line. So, I mean, from that and knowing that more stuff can go wrong than just type 1 diabetes, what would you say to type 1 diabetics about managing your diabetes during an endurance feat like this while also managing yourself? So, kinda like, I asked this question more of like in the advice kind of thing, and you could take it in like the mental fortitude, kind of the motivation realm of things, or the logistic realm of things of like, hey, this is the best one trick that I learned. But for people, because we talked about mental health earlier, a lot of people it just are even afraid to do this kind of stuff, especially with diabetes. So just knowing that one person like you has done it, that's tremendously helpful to get others to a start line of their own endurance event.
Yeah, it's the I think most of us that are successful at this sort of thing in managing our blood sugars, that's a terrible word, but
Yeah.
um, most of us that have been at this for a while figure out a baseline, and then you incrementally change things from that baseline, and you tweak things and figure things out over time. There's a lot that didn't go right. I lost my insulin pen probably around bike special needs, and the gel, the lack of gels. It wasn't lack of gels, but it was I didn't have enough, in my
Mhm,
opinion. I did have enough, but I like to have a buffer, right? Because you never know. Sometimes you do everything the same, right? One day your blood sugar tank for no apparent reason, right?
mhm,
Um, the the I think probably the best thing is just to try and make sure you have enough of a parachute in whatever you're doing. You have a backup plan or an escape plan if things don't go according, quite the way you want them to.
yeah,
The escape plan is not quite the right one, but um,
yeah,
you don't want to obsess about everything that could possibly go wrong, but you definitely want to have contingency plans.
Mhm.
Um,
because then you can manage it when it goes wrong, and you know
yeah,
how to continue on.
one of the things they said in the athlete briefing that I thought was awesome was enjoy the day you're having. 'Cause it's probably not gonna be the day that you hoped for or dreamed of,
Mhm,
right? And that's one of the things I'm personally working on is, happiness in whatever situation I find myself in. I realized a long time ago, or not so long ago, my parents never taught me how to be happy, and people that are happy in whatever situation they find themselves in. At least that's the impression I get. It's a double-edged sword, of course, you don't wanna be complacent,
mhm,
but, and that's not to say you don't recognize where there's room for improvement. Gratitude, I think, is helpful, and one of the things I'm currently working
Yeah.
on.
I think that's
Being
extremely
present.
important.
Yeah, being present in the moment is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Yeah.
Mhm,
Well, that's another thing too. Like another thing I wanted to mention that oh my God, you did an Ironman. I could never do that. Okay, that's true. And if you think about the whole thing, it's really intimidating. But it's make that first step and just focus on what's right in front of you.
mhm,
I knew I had a 112-mile bike ride and a marathon if I got through the swim, but I had to get through the swim. Let's get through the swim. See where it goes. Okay, we got through the swim. All right, let's get on the bike. Okay, got a 112-mile bike ride. Let's get to special needs. Okay, got there. And you
block
kind
it
of
off
chunk it up.
into different
Yeah.
And
segments.
yeah, and you can break it down into more manageable chunks.
Mhm,
Um, the the thing that I think a lot of people that do endurance sports they talk about distances, and for me, it's more about durations. Yeah, I ran 10 miles. Okay, how fast did you run? Did you run in 30 minutes, or did you run an hour and a half, 2 hours? It's a completely different thing, right? Especially for us with timing our insulin training and exercise. So yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we all kind of got to figure out what works for us and whatever our insulin delivery system is at the time. And, you know,
At
So,
least for us type 1s, the longest endurance event of our lives is living with type 1,
well,
and that
that's
is
the
something that
truth.
we have to do
Yeah.
every day.
And I
Yeah.
like to, I figured out a long time ago. It's like a marathon of 1,000 sprints, right?
Mhm.
And especially when I was on NDI without a CGM, it was okay. Get myself to the next meal, um, and then if things, hopefully you get things to where you're kind of dropping and you're kind of landing just before your meal, and then maybe you're not, and maybe you can correct at that point. And so that's sort of still true today. We have better tools. We can see what's going on. You can intervene soon.
Mhm.
But the dynamics of the insulins that we take can still kind of point to that. You
Yeah.
know,
We got better tools, but it's the same condition until
uh,
yeah. Awesome. I mean, I wanna thank you so much for the insight that you've given because I mean, we talk like it's one thing saying you did a triathlon and an Ironman with type 1 diabetes, but then it's another thing going into the details of it because I truly believe that's where people learn the most is through the details, through the reality of the situation of how awesome it felt to finish, but to also acknowledge that not everything went right that day, but then that was your perfect day that led you to that finish. And it is very it's a symbol of living life with type 1 diabetes at the end of the day to me. So just once again, John, huge congratulations on completing it. And I just thank you for all the information that you have given our audience today. I really, really think it's going to be impactful and it's going to be put to use.
that's I think that's what most of us hope for. Trying to
Mhm.
help each other out. Is the individual details are really individualistic, right? So
Mhm.
I say at the end of the day, a medical professional knows everything in the book, but there's no one on the planet who's gonna know you better than you can learn you.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And you talk about what worked for you that day. And my hope is for the listeners to tailor that, not directly copy it, because your blood sugar is not going to react how my blood sugar reacts, how Chris's blood sugar reacts, but it's to use what other people have learned. For example, and this is a simple example, but the hydration, how that impacts your blood sugar, and then discover what overly hydrating or dehydrating yourself does to your blood sugar by trial and error. But you can't start unless you start. So that's
I should point out, it's race day blood sugars are a complete random roll of the dice. I
mhm,
I got lucky, honestly.
yeah,
But, um, but, you know, I was it could have gone because I've had plenty of days where my blood sugar was through the roof, plenty of races on my blood sugars were through the roof. And,
mhm,
it's
and you
yeah.
power through that. Yeah,
The I think I've started to figure out that if most of the time the race is a couple hours after breakfast, kinda do my normal thing for breakfast and then play catch up as the day progresses, but yeah, it's always an adventure.
Yeah.
well, is there any further adventures in your future? Are you thinking of doing more Ironmans or
My son was like, "When we come back next year," and I was like, "I don't think so." And one of my running buddies is thinks he wants to do it. No, dude, don't. It's a bad idea. Um, I'll probably do a couple of sprints, local sprints. There's a park where they have about 6 local races a year that they can close the road off. They
Mhm,
close the park off and they have the park to ourselves, and that's kinda nice. And it's within driving distance. At some point, I'd like to try and do a ring to rim, the Grand Canyons. Um, I had done an ultra marathon a couple of years ago. Which was also a terrible idea. Um, because I had done a couple of half Ironmans, and I
mhm,
thought, "No, I got the fitness," and I was undertrained, and it was a long day, and it's a long time to be on your feet because I think it was so it was a 50K, so it was 31 miles, and I think it was like 60. I ended up 6.5 hours, something like that, because it's like another 10K on top of a marathon.
yeah,
Um, But I had, I'd seen some of these advertisements for some really cool trail races, and I thought I'd, do this ultra, see how that went, just to see if those were viable. And might try and get back to some of that, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well, keeping busy and staying active, and I think that's the best thing you can do with this condition. I'm the number one advocate of staying active with it.
Yeah.
Once again, John, thank you very much for everything that you provided today.
I just want to reiterate, thank you for coming on and agreeing to tell us your experience as a type 1 with an Ironman. I personally run ultra marathons, and I've always been looking at getting into triathlons, and just the small snippets of the type 1 thrown into triathlons, especially the part where it's like you focused on just take that first step, take that first step, make that transition, and don't look at the big picture. I think is some of the best advice that you touched upon in our conversation today, because when you look at the big picture, everything's daunting. But bringing it back, when I did my 50-mile trail race, that was the same mentality. It was like, all right, make the next aid station, make the next aid station, make the next aid station. I wasn't thinking about 50 miles. I was thinking about every 2 to 3 miles between aid stations, and they just kept ticking off as the day went. So you made it very, very, I guess, real for
Mhm.
people who are aspiring to do stuff like this, to give them that initial boost of confidence that, hey, maybe I can do this. And that's the one thing me and Joe have set out to do with working together, is just to bring more awareness and opportunity for people with type 1 to do those challenging things, because type 1 isn't the reason you're not going to do it. You're just that you have the mentality of a block that's stopping you from doing it, and that's the excuse you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's really amazing to see people doing all sorts of amazing things with type 1. I wasn't the first, I won't be the last, and I wasn't the fastest.
But you were still one of them, and you're in that category of people doing amazing things with type 1.
The but yeah, I mean that's I think all any of us are looking for is we can help people.
Thank you, John, for sharing your incredible journey with us today. From a sudden high school diagnosis to taking on the massive challenge of a full-distance Ironman. Your grit and calculation are highly inspiring. Your story is a powerful reminder that with a resilient mindset and proper preparation, no distance is out of reach. For all our content, please visit T1Determined.net. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, and on Facebook and YouTube at T1Determined. Please also like and subscribe, and you can leave up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Until next time, keep pushing your limits. I hope this helps. Stay strong, stay determined. T1 Determined.